Hello, lovelies. Welcome to the Fat Joy podcast, where we talk each week about how to flourish in an anti-fat world. I'm Sophia, a fat person and professional coach who loves talking to other fat people about what it's like to live within oppressive systems that marginalize our bodies, and how we still dare to have the audacity and courage to reach towards our collective liberation and embrace our joy. Please know this is an adult content podcast, so there will be swears, we will be talking about harms we've experienced, and we will be rebelling against diet culture, anti-fatness, ableism, racism, etc. If you'd like to support the Fat Joy podcast and get bonus content as a thank you, please check us out at patreon.com/fatjoy. I am so glad you're here with us. Enjoy. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Fat Joy podcast. I'm so excited for today's guest. Today, I have Reverend Dr. E.K. Is it Daufin?
Daufin.
Okay, beautiful. Who I found out about. I forget how I found you, but your book title caught my eye. It must have been some kind of Instagram post someone shared. Your book is called On Fat and Faith. And when I saw that, I had this moment of, oh, holy shit, I've never thought about anti-fatness within organized religion spaces before. And then I started to, and I was like, oh no, okay, I definitely need to talk to some experts on this. So I'm so happy you're here.
And all so-called spiritual spaces, because it's all through New Age, yoga, even many meditation, maybe not in the actual meditation, but in the prologue and the postlogue. So yes.
Thank you for naming that, because those are kind of the circles that I swim in these days since I stepped away from the religion I was raised in, which was Greek Orthodoxy. And yeah, there's some highly fraught spaces in New Age spiritualism for sure. Also, not just with anti-fatness, but with racism and all sorts of other, and cultural appropriation, classism.
Sexism, misogynoir.
Oh, is everyone excited about what we're about to talk about? Oh, I'm so good. Okay. Yay. All right. So Dr. EK, can you tell us about yourself?
Sure. I am a fat liberation high priestess and a poet laureate. I'm also an intersectional Black feminist race, class, and equity community activist and consultant. I earned degrees at The Ohio State University and Morgan State University. I've worked with NAFA and ASDA and AEJMC, because I expect your audience will know what the other acronyms stand for, but AEJMC stands for the Association for Education in Journalism and Mass Communication. It's the oldest and largest collegiate and university mass communication, organization, and also the Popular Culture Association's Fat Studies and Poetry and Black Studies area, and women's health and ecology areas. My work's been in Essence Magazine, the Los Angeles Times, CNN, as well as the New York, Ohio, and California public media, radio, and TV. And other stuff.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Just for people if they don't, because I actually surprisingly and gratefully have a lot of straight-sized listeners. So what NAFA is, see if I can pass this test. National Association for, is it size acceptance?
Fat acceptance.
For fat acceptance. Okay. National Association for Fat Acceptance, NAFA. And then what was the other one? The
ASDA.
Yeah.
Association for Size, Diversity, and Health.
Thank you. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, and both that have gone through an intersectional rebirth in recent years too, which I am so delighted. I had many painful battles before then.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that labor, because it makes the organizations much more inclusive and richer for it. So yeah. Wow. All right. So you have such credentials behind you. Let's bring it back to you, the person. What is your relationship, journey towards the word fat? How's this word showed up in your life?
Well, of course, and one of the things that I do is the book, on fat and faith, ending weight stigma in yourself, your sanctuary and society, is I use my personal lived experience to illuminate the intersections of particularly focusing on, and there are others. And the most deadly and intense are, often a Black. It's a pro-Black book. It's a pro-woman femme book. It's a pro-fat book. And of course, as a child, fat was a horrible curse word. It was yeah, and how it usually precedes, like all the other cuss words, curses, and that is, we talked beforehand about that cursing aren't cuss words, but are actually wishing something bad on someone. And as I say, is that fat now for me means it depends on, just as the N word and so forth. It depends on whose mouth comes out of it, that it comes out of, and in what context, what's the flavor on that fat. And so, of course, as a child, with my parents, my family, it's often many people think, and even, the internalized racism, Black folks often think, oh, there's no weight stigma, that's just, a little thing. No, it's a big thing. And when we talk about intersectionality being all present simultaneously, it's an intensifier. It makes it even worse. And I just had it was an argument. It was a difficult, challenging conversation.
It was a fight.
It was a fight with a friend who, she's a white, thin person, and it's very good in conversation with me, about weight, and she lets me talk about it and does not criticize me for it. And she's come to the point where she doesn't want to. She says, I don't want to compare. What I go through is, just as well. I don't know if she said important, but the idea though of intersectionality and social justice. I'm a social justice warrior. I just received an award for the 2023 Visionary Social Change Artist.
Wow! Congratulations! So, That's amazing.
Thank you. So in social change and social action, it is that, of course we need to have compassion for ourselves and recognize our own pain, and in no way minimizing, but in recognizing our social action, that other people with other, and I talk about visually identifiable, because the internal pain, no matter, for instance, you're a Greek Orthodox, but there are people who look like you who are African American, right? That's their culture, and then with the one drop rule, but that's their identity and their heritage, because we don't want to go to there about I feel Black and there I am, no. So and we won't mention that name of the woman I'm thinking of, but so you're visually identified, and the people who are straight, who the people who are LGBTQA plus, but appear either very masculine as men or very feminine as women, conventionally attractive, have huge unearned privilege.
They're like passing. That term passing, is that right?
And even if they aren't trying to pass, they are if they don't make sure. And that's often when people say, I often have people who are dismissive and say, well, if we talk about colorism, that if your hair isn't straight from the root, if your if you don't have light colored eyes other than, brown eyes, if you have, a small nose or thin lips, that makes you less than or ugly, that they say, oh, well, that means, Black folks are prejudiced against each other. So there's, it's just the way of the world. No, it isn't. And and often people who have those unearned privileges, they don't recognize them and reject them when and where they can. They think they are intrinsically good or better. And so there's a lot of hostility. And depending on where I am, I grew up in a family where I was the darkest female, which is, again, the sexism and misogynoir. So, the fact that there was, my father was darker skinned, that didn't matter because he was a man, and so, and that doesn't affect, a man's so-called, handsomeness. So the idea that we want to reject those privileges because people will often have hostility, right? And people say, well, I was born this way. And I try to get people of color, for instance, to say, well, what about white folks who say that to you about racism? I was born white. What do you want me to do about it? Scarlett O'Hara, after all, tomorrow is another day. That you need to recognize it and recognize and reject that privilege and do it all the time when others are watching and when they aren't, and speak up about it. And that often, once people trust you and see you do that on the regular, that often will stop some of that, hostility or some of the interpressed hostility, because people are so used to being abused by, folks who look like you, who aren't aware of that. So fat. So I talk about one of the first, my mother put me on a diet when I was 5 years old. And
in your book, you write about the diet plate, and I was so curious. Was that different food or just less food than everyone?
Both, all of the above. It was less food, and it was the diet version. So sometimes I actually want, like at a restaurant, not that especially, well, even pre-pandemic, but not that I go to restaurants much, but when I see the diet plate, sometimes if you go to a really nice restaurant, actually that's like really yummy and what I want, but I just can't ask for the diet plate and then call all that on me. But most of the time, if you go to like a really cheap restaurant, the diet plate is awful, and that's the way it was at my family house. And also, we were basically working class, and living in New York, which is, a really expensive city. So working class starts at a much higher rate. Another thing I like to say to people when we're talking about the intersectionality of race is that they say, oh, well, there's all this fat approval in the Black race. Absolutely wrong. What there is, especially in the Western world, for sure, right? And even more so, as the whole world is colonized by Western media, as well as actual guns and boats and, and economic colonization, that, even in, every city, for sure, in Africa that I know of, and I don't know them all, but I know a whole lot of them, there's weight stigma, fat stigma. And so the diet plate was, if people had butter on anything, I got nothing. It was dry. Like if it was butter on toast, I got dry toast, and at one point even, I really I like the crust. And at one point, there was stuff in the media saying that, oh, the crust has more calories, and so you get less bread when you cut off the crust. So I guess it is fewer calories, but, not to even be able to have the crust. And it was not for, cucumber sandwiches or anything fancy. It was that, calories, right? You don't get to eat that.
Yeah. And one thing I wasn't sure about, and then there was a big reveal in the book too. Did your mom eat that way also? Because
heck no.
Okay. Because you reveal she was bulimic, so she was throwing up. So she would,
spoiler alert, right? But there's plenty more. There's plenty more
I was
revealed in
gonna
the
say,
book,
there's a
folks.
lot of spoiler. There's a lot. This book, oh, I was gripped. Yeah. So you were the only one.
I was the only one. And sometimes, well, if money was short, and especially for meat and protein, my mother might have less of that. But you know, uh, and she would pile up, their plates first, because it was not buffet, dining. And it was not even, where we didn't grow up. I saw on TV first about putting dishes on the table and people serve themselves. No, no, no. My mother would prepare, each plate. And for me, for my brother, my father, there were seconds, but, not for me. And I would be punished if I, asked for it.
Can I ask, the one scene that just haunted me was when you hear some noise in the bathroom, you go in and you see your mom throwing up, and then you proceed to, like, she explains, oh, well, this is what women do to stay thin, and you ask to be taught how.
Right.
What a moment. Like, how, oh, I don't even know what question to ask about that. It was just so heartbreaking and poignant. And I could just see the intergenerational trauma just like passing through.
Right. One of the intergenerational traumas. And, and it was yet another, I bless my body, because, and I thank her for staying with me, even though, I so, hated her and abused her, because I was told this is what's keeping you from being treated with respect and kindness and love. And because you're bad is the reason, that your body is like this. And so it was yet another, thing that was wrong with me, because, all I ever gave myself was a sore throat, trying to stick my finger down my throat and throw up.
Yeah. I have a friend who tried that as well, and she kept like hemorrhaging the veins or whatever in her eyes, and that finally made her stop. But I remember like the violence of it, like the violence that we enact on our own bodies, because so much violence is enacted upon us by everyone else.
It's a way to survive. And there's also so much denial about not wanting to, denial about harming ourselves. It's like, no, we're bad. We're just being good now. We're doing what we need to do to be good. That also, there are plenty of fat people, especially women, the groups of men who tend to have higher cases of bulimia that we ever know or find out about are, jockeys, because they have to stay so thin and so strong, and wrestlers.
Wrestlers too.
Oh, yeah. And to a lesser degree, because there are other weight classifications in, boxing and so forth. But if you are a flyweight and you're never going to make midweight, to stay at that flyweight, it's not small man weight, it's flyweight, which is not right. And it's generalized to, all women, and so and so the whole idea that many Black women in particular, because and this kind of helps us wind back to that when I was talking about, depending on where I am, I'm considered light skinned, and then like in my family and other places I'm dark skinned, that for Black women in general in the U.S., so it's not that we get a break on being fat, or that fat is praised, but that what is considered fat starts a little bit higher, because average weights are a little bit higher. And even I wrote a chapter in a book called Black Culture, and it's about you know, health at every size, or, you know, we can't get HAES, HAES is a, you know, a copyrighted, a trademark term. And so we can't get rid of that now. But what we really would like to say is, like, you know, decency, respect.
Right. Dignity at every size.
Yeah. That kind of thing. So, rather than, oh, you know, as long as you're healthy and big, then you're okay.
Yes.
And that, you know, health is a continuum, and it changes for all the vicissitudes of life, and all the stages of life, and, you know, not indoctrinations, but in passages, you know, of life and roles that, you know, and, you know, people who, that's the thing that got me, is kind of winding back to all the things about the word fat, is that, you know, all the things people do, like, it took me a while. It's only in the last maybe 10 years, maybe 15 years, that I realized when people say, like, one woman said to me, well, I have to get my health back. And I was like, well, we're on this hike right now, and she seems to be doing fine. So I'm like, oh my God, well, you know, in case I have to administer first aid, what is this health that you don't have back? And she says, oh, you know, oh, because of her weight. It's like, you know, thin people have all, you know, some thin people have all the same challenges, problems, vulnerabilities, you know, diseases and so forth. You know, it's just not blamed on them. They're just poor, helpless little creatures, you know, if that, and the whole idea of little creatures, you know, oh, that means, you know, that you should be treated with some delicacy, you know, and people who are mean to you are bad, but if people were bad to the big folks, oh, they can take it. You know, and no, I can't. So, you know, so the whole notion, and then the sacrifices that are made. For instance, a lot of Black women who are bulimic can't get diagnosed. They can't get the help that they need, because when they just say, hey, you have to be, surely, you know, and that's the thing, like, if people see you exercising, you know, for instance, oh, you know, an acquaintance of mine messed up my bike wheel, but, you know, I love when the weather's not hardly hot, where as it is most of the time in Montgomery, Alabama, that, you know, I love biking. I think it's as close to flying as I'm ever going to get. And, you know, but periodically, or, you know, just at different times, every time I'm, you know, biking regularly, there are, you know, people harassing me. And one of the gentlest kinds of harassing, which is still like a downer when I'm trying to feel fat joy, trying to feel joy for who I am, right? And is that they say, like, they'll yell at me. They don't know me. They'll yell at me and they'll say, you know, how much weight have you lost? It's like, you know, this is not weight, you know. And so I, you know, I have a, you know, I've had this my whole life, so I have some comeback, you know, and the comeback is, you know, it's the nearest to flying as I can get, or, you know, it's a gorgeous day to be out.
Reorient the conversation.
Yeah, or I even say, well, you know, and it's not a conversation, it's a drive-by. Only I'm the one biking by, and they're throwing the bullets at me.
It always amazes me what people think they can say. Like,
yes, and the thing that a lot of folks, you know, and again about the intersectionality and us understanding. In fact, I even have, I have a model called Layers of Unearned Privilege. And, you know, I worked with it for so many years, and, you know, people may argue about which gets the most points in each category, but I had two models. One was a racing track model I tried, because I saw for racism, people were using hurdles, running hurdles, right? And that, you know, trying to say, well, look, if you're, you know, Black, you're going to have a big hurdle. And if you're white, and I know there are lots of others, and 5 basic, you know, other races, but I'm just using the extremes typically, you know, and then it's, you know, visually identifiable, right, is a whole nother intersectional add-on. that you don't even get the idea that, well, I'm taking my identity and I am, fighting back and being proud in it, because you have the choice. If you are not visually identifiable, you have the choice to do that, or otherwise identifiable. Did you know that people are 85% or more accurate, U.S. study done, to identify people's race from their voice?
Really?
Yeah.
That feels very high.
It is very high. And so, and there are certain cues you can use, right? Or at least in my circles will say, like, black talk, this is what I'm really, talking about. And that's also called code switching, to be able to, talk in that way. So if you're talking quote unquote standard, English, the resonance and the sound and the tone and what you emphasize in your pronunciation and enunciation, gives people cues. And then so much of this is subconscious. And what people need to realize is that, and especially for all the wonderful straight-sized, fat allies that are there, and that means an ally to fat people. So not a fat person who's fat, who's ally. But, that even when you don't mean it, it hurts and it's harmful. And just because you do things that you don't, you didn't mean to be hurt, if you keep doing them and just say, oh, that's the way I am, then that's effed up, and that needs to stop. And that does mean that maybe you're not a great person, in my book, just in my book, and not in Sophia's. She's not responsible for my opinions, nor does she get me. Hear all of them. Disclaimer.
No, I put strong boundaries around people who, when I say, hey, what you're doing is harmful for me. And if they say, no, it's not, I say, well, we have nowhere to go then. And there's a boundary. I mean, there's nothing I can do at that point if they're not open.
You're right. There is one that's, when they say, no, it's not, it's completely lost. There's also another one that's really difficult when people say, oh, that's the way I am, and they turn it around, you're hurting me because, you're criticizing me and what I am, the way I am. And it's like, some things, like everyone needs their own boundaries, and you need to, but then admit it, right? It's like, if it's real, if this means that you don't want to deal with racism, if it means that you don't want to deal with sizeism, and with sizeism comes, that food demonization and so forth.
Then own it. Like, at least own it. Yeah, I agree. I'm
an MFer, and that's what I am. Like Popeye, I am what I am. That's what I am. And then I can at least respect you. Oh, there's this cultural irony, funny, that says that racism. And this is, there's racism, in the North America, South, East, West, everywhere. Also in Brazil. So many white people in Brazil want to tell me there's no racism in Brazil because Brazil had more slaves numbers than the United States, more enslaved people, not slaves, enslaved people. And also in the U.S., enslaved people, Black folks were used as currency. And it's the U.S. enslavement and breeding industry.
In your book, when you said breeding, I thought, oh, shit, I don't think I've read it that way before. And that, it just, I mean, this is a very privileged thing I'm about to say, but like that felt like it was just out of a movie. Like, that can't be real. And it is.
Yeah. And the sad thing is that none of the movies I've seen, and I've seen a whole lot of movies that, completely the fictional crazy ones, and even the ones that are supposed to be documentary, they don't focus on the breeding, of, that damages men and it damages women even more, because they say, you only need one rooster in the hen house, to impregnate the hens, and the sexual imposition on Black women. And that's another thing with today contemporary with fat women, and intersectionally it's worse for Black and brown and red women, that the whole notion of when they say, people confuse rape with sex and conventional attractiveness and value and so forth. And so people say, well, don't nobody want to rape you, because you're fat. And so when fat women of any color come up and say, I was raped, they'll say, oh no, you weren't, because you could have fought him off. You were, and God don't let it say, about a man who was smaller than you, who may have raped you. And so there's this. I've also worked in sexual assault as a peer counselor in sexual assault, and as a survivor too, and that there's a judge. He's dead now. Yay! There was a judge who he decided to demonstrate, saying that there was no such thing as rape. There's always consent, that a woman can stop a man. And he turned a bottle. He spun a bottle on his desk and said and acted as though he was trying to put a pencil in the spinning bottle, and said, "See." That was his demonstration of how, a woman cannot be raped,
That is disgusting.
Also in, looking at the intersection in African-American communities, that there is huge sexism and misogyny in the Black community. And because Black women are seen as service creatures, that in the Black, typical Black church, for instance, there are, because there are Black women there are more higher weight women there, because we just tend to be, higher weight, and for no punitive or derogatory reason or action, of our own. One of the things about the breeding us, the women who could actually live through being bred and worked, as many much research shows, as hard as a man, even while pregnant. And people say, that doesn't make sense, because we were being bred as animals of labor and service, and not prized animals, not as race horses who you may pamper and braid their hair and make sure you have the vet when they foul and so forth, but just as like ants, or the way on a mass hog farm, that it's a matter of numbers, so there was it's not like, we'll take it easy on Lucy because she's pregnant. We want to, and this will mean more wealth for us, so we want to make sure she has a good pregnancy. It's just like, no, just impregnate as many as you can. It's like, mass farming, where there's no care even for the individual animal, service animal, but just to it's a matter of numbers. The same way, for instance, drug companies, if the drug only kills a certain number of people,
they'll just settle out of court, not change anything.
Yeah. And if those people are brown people, and much less brown fat people, but, that there's no, we're not taken to be telling the truth. And so, maybe this is a good time to not change, but to move in for a little while about weight stigma and the way fat is treated in sanctuaries and sacred spaces and religion. That one thing in Protestantism, it's the Protestant work ethic, and in Christianity, there is the notion of, gluttony is one of the 7 deadly sins. And the notion, and this is one of the things that Hayes and ASDA, are still are championing, working on. NAFA too, but NAFA has some other, platforms ahead of that, most fat people, big animals has, I also stop people and try to intervene when people are weight stigmatizing animals, because, and I am a Humane Society volunteer, and I often have to stop those folks too, and or there's certain groups, and of course I had hoped to meet allies and other people who love pets, and I have. However, that weight stigma among the humans is still horrible.
Like towards the animals?
Towards humans and towards the animals. Like they, one person, for instance, on our volunteer group online, they sometimes we post comics or things that are funny or jokes or little videos, that give us strength to go on and do this hard work, because it is, hard work, and so physically and emotionally. And they'll someone put, there's one of a fat woman who has a chihuahua wedged in her behind, who looks like the animal has been run over. It's obviously hurt. It's supposed to be haha funny,
like she sat on it and it's now stuck in her butt. I mean,
but she's putting on a post board lost pet, a lost dog, and so they put that on there. And I had just adopted a small dog, a chihuahua, just like the thing from the Humane Society, that Humane Society. And the woman who posted it had taken the picture that we put up whenever anyone adopts one of the animals. We put it on the website, and especially when it's one of our own, the volunteers, we put it there too. And yay, even if you've got like way too many dogs and cats already, yay, you've got one. We know you'll take care of them. And so you take care of them right, not just adequate, but will really be a loving home for them. And I said, stop doing, and it was not the first time that same exact comic had been used. And I said, please, I said, so I just, adopted, this dog, and it.
They probably didn't even put it together in their minds, though. They don't see it.
One of the things I say in the book too is that, and the part you might not have gotten to yet, is about how to apologize and to really move toward grace, and so one of the things you have to do is that rather than to say, oh, I didn't mean to, and let it stop there, that means I should be, done. So, and I know it's hard, because I've had to do it, right? But there was no, so I did, and so on that comic, I copied the volunteer director as well as the operations director, who are, members of that group. And I said, please, won't someone take this down? So they took it down. And the next time I saw the woman who put it up, she was acting kind of sheepish, but she didn't just say, oh, EK, I'm so sorry. Now I realize I was blind, but now I see, none of that, which really helps heal, just pushing it down and not saying anything about it. That only makes it fester.
I think it's because we're terrible at being uncomfortable as humans, like she probably felt shame and guilt and then awkwardness, and we're not good at making messes and then repairing.
Right. Oh, we're very good at making it.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, we make a lot of messes, but we're not good at repairing. We're like not good at cleaning it up. And yeah, in my coaching practice, I talk about this so often with clients, everyone from job seekers to leaders, and this whole idea of like, how do we have the hard conversation? How do we have the fight and then repair after? And it's, I really believe if we could do that better, I feel like so much of the world would be a little more harmonious. Just,
oh, ashe, amen, aho, yeah. And that I do talk a little bit about that in the book. And the problem that I found is that I, in attempting to do that work, and even, and in the workplace, I also found that I had to stop doing that in the workplace, because especially as a intersectionally disprivileged person, that instead of other people taking well, first of all, other people weren't doing the same process, right?
No, it's true.
Owning.
Yeah. You can't be the only one making messes and owning it.
Yeah. And then if you have many, I think that it would, depending on the environment. Well, let me change that. I was getting ready to say that maybe, straight, white, thin, thin muscled, white men, blonde eyed, blue-eyed, blonde white men, may, have, eventually, I think eventually, because of their power, if they eventually did that, if they were willing to take those risks, and this is kind of what social action is for, and social justice for allies. If you are willing to continue to take the risk to reject your privilege, or that folks who know you might not give you the privilege that you are used to having as just on the regular, that you think is just normal life, for folks, and it ain't for the rest of us, that is a even more powerful way to change, because I found that it was used to demonize me and say, see, she's Black, she's fat, she has a PhD that, she got that, somebody gave that to her, she didn't earn it, versus it was harder for her to do everything she had to do, to earn that. So it just allows them, people who are weak on the moral front, it allows them to, instead of saying, let me model when I mess up, to, take responsibility, say, I'm sorry, I messed up. And I know, and this is what I think was the harm that I caused. And this is what I'm going to do in the future to not do that, and to carry through. And to say, I tell people, I remind them to do it nicely, but when I, if I mess up, because, habits, depending on how ingrained they are, they're really hard, to change, that if I mess up and I don't catch myself again, please very gently, and especially at first, very gently, say, hey, remember, you're going to, that's one of the things you're going to work on or try not to do, or make the effort. So
it's so worthy. It's so worthwhile to do that work. And it's very interesting. I'll say I have a corporate background. I've worked at startups. I've worked in academia. And right now I'm so lucky to work in an organization. It's a creative writing studio where the founder, and all 10 of us, there are 10 of us, half BIPOC, which we're really proud about, very intentionally, we trained on this. We met with anti-oppression educators to teach us how to mess up, how to be in conflict, how to sit with discomfort, both individually and with each other. And we're not perfect, but there's this commitment to doing that and holding that grace for each other and supporting each other through the mess. So, I mean, I'm very lucky. I think it's pretty rare that I'm actually in a place where I've worked in an actual workplace where I've seen this happen, and it's magical.
Yeah.
So it's worth doing. It's worth attempting. I'm curious, Dr. EK, how did this work translate into the faith spaces? Like, what brought you into those spaces?
Yeah, there, from the, beginning, pretty much, because I went to a Catholic, I got a scholarship that I'm grateful for preschool, a Catholic preschool, because I was in Brooklyn in a poor area, not the worst of the poor, but working class, edging on Poe, area that I, as my mother said, I would have gotten my ass beat every day, and probably would have. And so, not that I wasn't treated horribly in other ways, There's these T-shirts they have, I survived Catholic school. Yeah. And I was like, I want to get one of those. And I, when I graduated in 8th grade from Catholic school, I said, that was my biggest test of faith, was to, and I was still, a straight Christian at that point, with a capital C, that was my biggest test of faith, other than my family, which I didn't know it at that point, because all the abuse had been so normalized. So it was easy to begin in the Catholic school, and when educational standards at some point, and we beat them back. They come back like, weigh the kids, put them on weight loss diets, get them down to size, or even, put the parents in prison, or penalize the parents, somehow if your kids are fat, or we won't let them come to school if, they're so fat. And so there was, of course, teasing. My parents were always, viciously weight stigmatizing, and my brother too. Everyone in the family, because they followed their lead, and it was a horrible thing to be, and that men were allowed, especially if they played football. And they say in the South, oh my God, football is so big. I mean, it's big everywhere, but oh my goddess, it is so big that one Black comedian said, he said on stage that football is next to Jesus. Jesus is here, and in the Bible Belt right then, and football is right up there next to Jesus. And it gets me that the prayers I've heard and seen televised that teams do before the game, they're asking to win. They're not saying, let us all be safe, especially in football. They ought to be praying for everybody not to die, or be put on, be closer to death, one step closer to death, or injured, and to, enjoy the game, but it's, let us win, and, be convicted over our enemies. And it's like, these aren't enemies, they're people who, are playing their team, for their team. So anyway, unless, men who play, men who play football, particularly Black men who play football, Black and brown men, as the guy who was the award-winning famous author of The Growing Tree, or Tree Grows in Brooklyn. Tree Grows in Brooklyn, I think. He said that, that sports make honorary white men of football players. So there's so men, and the women's sports, are gymnastics, and even and ballet, and where there's all the Alvin Ailey dancers and the Black ballet troupes are done because most of our muscular, even if we are one of those few people who can, by all the torturous means, be that thin, still have bigger buttocks, and bigger thighs, that's seen as, that's fat, So it was always an issue in the Catholic school that I was at. And I used to, oh God, well, I created from the very beginning, which, I think was a spiritual subconscious memory to help me is. So I created altars, in my room, and I have wherever I've gone. And I met a woman who was a great healer for people who are survivors of sexual assault at one point in California. And she's the one that gave me the nerve. She modeled. I noticed, oh my God, she's got an altar in her office. And so, to sanctify your workspace too. And I talk about in the book, how to do it in a drawer, if you're lucky enough to even have a drawer. That
mine is right there. That's my altar.
Yeah. Nice. Ooh, I want to see it.
I know. It's got all my stones. I have a little mini one right in front of me. I've got my chakra stones.
Beautiful. Yeah. That's wonderful.
I think there's something about the physicality and the ritual that can be deeply supportive.
and I've worked more than once, in horribly hostile, abusive workplaces, and to have something like that, because you're forced, for earning a living to, be there and deal with this horrible treatment, that it helps, to have that nearby. It strengthens your spirit, to endure. So that was part. And then I noticed, so spirit has always been very much, I know that it helped me survive my childhood. And I had some psychic experiences.
You mentioned that in the book. That's fascinating. Do you still? Is that kind of what you?
That's my center, because I am still, the blessing and the curse of the of being in so many intersections and aware of them, and looking to create a new society, a new and better way of doing things. That, when I go to Black churches, they are extraordinarily patriarchal. They are, I was in, when I lived in Denver, I was in a New Age Black church, because I was going to talk about, the Christian Black churches are going to have the work ethic, and, and when you see pictures of, when you see pictures of the Jesus, he's never a fat guy,
He's pretty gaunt.
Yeah, and there's a laughing Buddha, right? But it's laughing Buddha who is, big and fat and jolly. And I see, it drives me crazy. They won't even let the fat Buddha be the fat Buddha that, who is not a god, right? He's a teacher and a model, but they won't even let the teacher be, a fat guy who is laughing and happy. They say that the Buddha was actually very thin, because there's also the thin Buddhas, and that the Buddha was actually very thin, and that's just just like in the violence and African Americans, and maybe I shouldn't say just like, but in a similar fashion, that when a Black person is violent, well, that's the way they are, and they need to be punished, and they're just bestial, and it's just in them. Whereas when a white person is violent, they are treated with great, compassion, and
something must have made them do it. It's not their fault. Yeah.
Yes. And nobody wants to hear about what made the Black person, go through all that, because, when you talk about the systematic racism, then you have to say, oh, well, I'm privileged in that sense. So I'm part, unless I work on rejecting it and changing it, and none of us are perfect, but work on it consistently, then I'm part of the problem, even though I'm not like a lot of allies, feel uncomfortable with the term white supremacy, but, that's not just, in fact, it's a small number, and that's what people want to say, oh, it's just the small crazies, we're not out there, shaving our heads and, waving our swastikas and so forth. It's the consciousness that what is white or appears white or closest to white is better, smarter, more beautiful, so anytime we can change that narrative, and even in art and physical beauty that we look for and create. And in third grade art class, I was thrown out of an art class, and my work wasn't initially shown, because in a color in, a substitute teacher, a color in Jesus, and I made the face rounder, so fatter, and I colored it brown. Now when I don't do it as much as I used to anymore, because of some other difficulties, but when I am an auntie to children, because they're not paying me, so it's not babysitting, though they're using me like that, right? And that's why I don't do it as much anymore. But when I'm an auntie to children, if we do any coloring, if I get them to color the people brown, woo! I'm like, my job here is done. And especially finally with one, and it was an East Indian little girl who was one of the, and again, it's, the whole idea of color, that is much worse for a woman, a female, to be, darker skinned. And she was asking me, she said, Auntie, I need the brown crayon. I need the brown crayon. I have to color in her face. And I was like, mic drop.
Nice.
I am done here.
Yes.
I may go my life. I don't have to do anything else for the rest of my life. I have done. And this same wonderful, wonderful young woman, she went to the a medicalized Northern Alabama, University of Alabama, Birmingham, might as well just say it, campus. And I did the first, and as far as I know, the last so far, session on fat acceptance, and it was versus fat approval, because on a medicalized campus that was really big. And I was so thrilled that this same little girl, she was no longer a little girl, she's a young adult, came to that session, and she listened and was respectful. However, then later she said, well, I'm having some anxiety, and so everyone has their thing. See, so I have anxiety, and then fat people are fat. It's like, fat people have anxiety too, more so than your thin behind,
Yeah.
Thin sorority behind, so,
Well, and how does all this come into some of the newer age religions and like the culture? I mean, when I think about yoga, there's been such an increase in awareness of how yoga is quite culturally appropriative. And I've seen some yoga studio owners really addressing that and calling out the other problematic aspects. So like, what are you seeing there?
That's so wonderful. I'm so glad to see that. And, I'm blooming where I am planted, which Montgomery, Alabama. And so there's very few, there have been very few yoga spaces, and most of them have, I couldn't speak to how quickly they may go out of business in larger metropolitan areas, but certainly here they go out of business pretty quickly because they have trouble maintaining. And so I haven't seen a whole lot of that. And when it's done, it's still, belly dancing. I've been a professional belly dancer, and so many people, even recently in this, one teacher in Montgomery who's gone out of business, that she and I think that was pre-pandemic, but she had one super size. I don't know if she was maybe past supersized to infinifat. I don't know how, she wouldn't identify with both those, but, it was such a big thing that, and also I believe as a non-medical person, or therapist, she appeared to be anorexic. She was bone thin and always trying to be, healthy, microbiotic, all these different kinds of eating programs for health are almost always, for most people, people who aren't diagnosed with, gluten sensitivity, or really, it's just another way to diet and be good, but then say, oh, no, I don't believe in weight loss, but I believe in health, and that, and really, so it's subconscious. So what I see, in the, what I like in, some yoga spaces, which is, I've only been able to get them in select books, because most of them, they're saying, well, if you're fat and you have a bad body, right, until you lose weight, which is the trouble with, I do, as a peer counselor, and for myself personally, I do EFT, religiously, as people say.
What is EFT?
EFT is emotional freedom technique, also known as tapping.
Oh, okay. Yes.
One of the links you'll give folks is,
and this, right? Isn't there one here?
Yeah, it tells about the tapping points. And I plan to do more fat positive, because almost all of them are into weight loss, and even the ones that claim to be body image are really anti-fat.
Yes.
They're really for, thin people who are passing, for what thin people call not thin. It's like they're not a size 3, but they're a size 5, 6, 7, 8, or, oh my God, a size 12.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as I do that, I was one of those people because I saw no other option. And when and still I'm daring to be a different option and catching a lot of crap for it. But if I'm going to catch crap anyway, I might as well be speaking my truth, and trying to lead people to a different, better consciousness. So what I see is that, and people say, things are developing. No, people are sacrificing and paying the price to make it change. Power does not concede power willingly. And so things do not just get better. There are people we don't know about who are sacrificing, working, being driven crazy and to the poorhouse and to poor health, and to the grave, trying to fight against these things. And then when it moves a little bit, we say, oh, see, evolution. No. It's revolution. Okay. It's the result of revolutionary actions. So and there's a wonderful, broad ranged, there's several, online, new age, with the shift of consciousness, even, that I talk about, and the shift of the earth and, ascension and so forth. All of them are freaking so weight stigmatizing. So when I see it in yoga, it's like, oh, well, you're not thin enough to do the real asana, so I'll do this, this primary. This, silver gray, because ageism is a big thing too. So now they have like silver and gold, if you're not good enough or strong enough to do the real thing, here's this we'll put you in, and all honor and praise to the good that special education does and remedial education does. But we'll put you in the remedial class because of the way your body is, not because you haven't learned. So they act as though, once you learn these tools, and that's the thing too about the others, is like, if they are not, as far as, like white supremacy, waving the flags, it's still all invested in them about, well, you're fat now, but once you start doing the right things, exercising and eating right, then you will be thin and you will be able to. And instead of saying, hey, it's a mechanical thing, you have flesh here, wonderful, living, beautiful flesh, not, oh, if we could cut that off, you would be good, you would be sexy, you'd be attractive. You have body here. It's just like, we should say that it's just like, people, if they have muscle on their bicep, right? If they have a big bicep and without the compensating big lower arm, right? So not that they're fat, they have this, less layers of fat on their muscles that, so you can't do a certain position because you have that big old muscle right there. And, muscle, oh, that's so smart. That's good. That's great. That means you're a good person if you got muscle. But what I noticed is that they mean you got muscle, because when I have done frenzied, unhealthy amounts of exercise, I muscle up too, and I muscle up under the fat, right? The fat doesn't go away. I muscle up under the fat, and I'm actually, bigger than, but people say, well, if you keep that up, because supposedly, muscle is supposed to metabolize or use calories more effectively or easily, but the way my body's built, you just can't do enough and live and pay the rent and be a human being, in addition to that, if it's even possible, if you forego those things, So we should say, so this is, if your body has this configuration, then this is the way you need to do the asana so that it is good for, has the same goal spiritually, energetically, to be there. So I have not so far, so there some people have made big strides and big change and sacrificed so much that there's a little change, and if you look really hard for it, you can find it. But what I have found in the tapping, as well as, people say body image, and there'll be a couple of, good things, and then suddenly the weight stigma will like hit me when I'm in a very vulnerable, meditative, because they call them tapping meditations, often, so you'll be in that altered consciousness state. You work to get there, right? And, so that you can change wiring of your braining. And then they're reinforcing, the weight stigma, again. So that's why I'm going to do some fat positive. And I understand, like, Marilyn Wan, who wrote, Fat so, that she's very much, I saw she was very critical of the word fat acceptance. And I understand in certain, that in order to keep your job or whatever, that you're already doing something dangerous, so we might use some of these terms. But, acceptance, just like teaching tolerance, the Southern Poverty Law Center here does this thing for education on racism, and it's teaching tolerance. And even when I applied for a job with them, I still hated the thing, teaching tolerance. Like, I am so good and I will tolerate you.
Yeah, I don't like that word.
And it's better than vicious hatred, but not very much. So, so I'm working on, one of the things I'm doing in the future is more fat positive tapping scripts for folks, and teaching folks how to identify fat stigmatizing folks. And just to circle back, and there's a lot in between, but they can read some of it in my book, but coming to fat positivity myself, because even as I found that even in goddess worshiping circles, which are still so reviled and, treated poorly and literally demonized, when the idea of Satan and the devil is a Christian concept, not a Wiccan, earth religion concept. So the literal demonizing of those things, still find, if you look at books for, Wiccans and witches and earth religion folks, they're still trying to tell you, here's a spell to lose weight.
Oh, I know.
What?
Why?
And if you go to a circle and you're supposed to bring food, there's all kind of food restrictions. Or if people eat, if something that does have, higher sugar or higher fat, or, has yummy life-preserving energy and carbs and things in it, that people will demonize themselves, and therefore us, the rest of us who are eating it. I'm being so bad. Blah, blah, blah. I even have to, I constantly say it to folks, I'm good no matter what I eat. It's one of my little ways that I don't have to go through the whole spiel and get them all frightened, so that even when, you're having a feast, which is supposed to be the joyful thing, and, that's, the whole idea, which I didn't get from childhood, but the whole idea is that, and in tapping and EFT, there's the overcoming psychological reversal. And one of the phrases we say is, even though, X, I deeply and completely love myself. And so, even though I'm fat, I deserve to eat.
Yeah.
Even though I'm fat, I need food. Even though I'm fat, I deserve love and care and respect and safe, sensuous sex and loving sex, and, that just, because there's the whole idea about you just eat too much. So that, that's not true. And that fat animals, we talked about stigmatizing of fat animals, and, oh, you whale, and whales are wonderful. But I too, on a dating app, which is, oh God, racism and sizeism is so nasty, but it's one of the few, since people don't tend to have house parties anymore, or, and fat folks can't get into the debutante, and the few that are left, like maybe in the South here where I am, that the social venues, for meeting matches and getting companionship, even for straight people, much less, well, I should speak with others on that for the things that are not my circle of expertise. Is that what you were saying? Or strong circles.
Yeah.
So, the whole notion, that, we should be, happy, to, have anything, done for us or with us, or to be considered good. And other people say, like, then, in religious circles, particularly, people say, well, the body, there's a demonization of the body, period, right? That you're supposed to be this soul, and this is where evil and temptation and so forth are. And we're going to, and everything, like, even in the tapping meditations that I say, are not fat positive, they'll talk about anything that's bad. They'll talk about it being dark, which is racist. right? Unless you're talking about actual light or lack of light as in illumination, not spiritual illumination or goodness, right? And they talk about it being heavy. Anything that is earthbound, which is, a woman is, that's a symbol of, the woman is the Mother Earth, right? That, and in one divinization system that I was with a group of people and they said, oh, you're Earth. And I'm like, oh, that means that everybody's going to rape me, use me, and not respect me and give to me and nourish me and to say, oh, you are the, and the mammy that Black women are, stereotyped is not the mother that we will give to and serve because she gave us life and everything, not the one that we will respect and make things easier for. Right. But it's the one who will always keep giving till she dies, like the giving tree, in that child story or allegory.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, wow. Thank you for those. I don't know. Would you call them affirmations? I love the sayings that you were saying, like, even though, and then you were, for people listening.
I use affirmations for those. They're called, I think they're called statements, because you're tapping on acupressure and acupuncture points that are supposed to help them go deeper, as I say, literally tap into. And so the one on the side of the hand, not only is that the one that is for psychological reversal, it's like, oh, you don't really believe it yet, or like so much of my life is that they say, also New Age is about everything is personal responsibility. It's all your fault, right?
I know. That's one of my biggest frustrations, is that this systemic level is not held to account of in any way, that we somehow can do everything, create everything. Like, the individualism of it is, I think, very well designed to keep us from looking at the systemic level abuses and violence.
Part of a white supremacist, patriarchal, capitalistic system. And, and that you can buy your way out of anything, and that you can, and so any failure, because that's how you can get, billions of dollars, people spending billions of dollars again and again. If you say, well, you don't say, hey, the whole idea of weight loss dieting is not physically possible. The New Agers will say, and even, Christians, and I've heard Jewish people say it, and Hindu people say it, and that if you were godly enough, right, because everything is possible with God. So what I have come to, and what, at least as as a multireligious minister, including, our earth-based religions, allows me to do and solves the cognitive dissonance, for me, is that in third dimension, in physical being, and I believe also in fourth and fifth dimension, maybe the dimensions above there, it's a little different, and I know that part of ascension is getting to the vibrational point where physically, vibrationally, but we become different creatures. We're no longer flesh and blood. We no longer, the physiology won't work the way it works now, where, weight loss is, weight gain is very complicated. It's not one cause. And just like diabetes and some diseases, you have to have a genetic predisposition for it. And like, pollution is one of the things, and who are in the more polluted places? Well, poor people. And even with all those things done, for instance, what I like to talk about is the long-term twin studies. Of course, they're so expensive and hard to do, so there aren't a whole lot of them. But one of the things that they haven't paid much attention to, but is in the twin studies, and that's when they get twins and they follow them over 10, 20, 30, 40, sometimes 50 years if they can, right? And they look at what are the and then that they have been adopted, so that they did not grow
separately.
Up. So, yeah, so it's not physiological. They have all, no matter what, like, some may have been in exercise, do a lot of exercise. Others are I hate couch potatoes. There's got to be a better.
They're less athletically inclined.
and then we still have such praise for athleticism, and there's all kinds of athleticisms. So anyway, we'll skip that. So that that there'll be fatter ones because no matter what you do, there's going to be a variance of size that is natural and fine. And if you do not fit the conventionally attractive variables, you should not be forced to treat yourself inhumanely in order to try to get there.
Yeah, that's the violence piece. Yeah. So I want to bring us to the final question, which is about joy. How do you stay connected to joy, Dr. EK?
So joy, because the more oppressed intersectional identities that you have, the more difficult it is to have joy. And again, in New Age in particular, because the one thing that can be helpful in Christianity and in at least the practice of Judaism in many of the communities or synagogues that I have seen and visited with, is that there's the idea of life is hard, and you're only going to have joy when you get to heaven, and
the suffering. We must suffer.
So with and the New Age idea that if you're suffering, it's because you're doing something wrong, because you're just supposed to be happy all the time. And so so what brings me joy? One thing is that I'm constantly in prayer. There's something about, and I love all dogs. I can just, with the cards I was dealt in life, it's easy for me to handle and care for smaller animals. And my north node is in my south node. North nodes. One of my moon nodes is in Virgo, and so that's supposed to make joy. Oh, that's a good thing for the people interested in astrology. There's a kind of astrology that talks about where is I think the north node is the challenge, and the south node is supposed to be what brings you joy. Forgive me, people who are better in astrology or present with that knowledge base at this moment. And we've been to so many good knowledge bases. Files are roving. The whole idea about, so there's, in astrology, you can look like, what are the things that astrologically are supposed to give me joy? And you can, and depending on how intersectionally oppressed you are, money has a whole lot to do with it, money and time. And so, then one of my sayings, which, is that too much of a good thing is not a good thing. So, when people say, oh, well, and I haven't asked you about your plans, but, oh, you single, no kids, you got time to take that bath. You got time. It's like, yeah, also, and I know there are a lot of bad husbands and wives and, mothers and fathers and so forth. But if you got nobody to do nothing for you, none of the time, unless you can pay them to do it, and they still might not do it or do it well, then, and I guess that's true with spouses and families too. But, that you do have to do everything, for yourself. So you don't always, we don't have limitless time either. And sometimes we are, let me just say, just as strapped for time rather than saying even more, just as strapped for time. So I remind myself, and I work very hard, and I have been blessed and fortunate to be able to, afford, because it takes money and time to care for pets. And so I love the way, and I have a cat too. I love the way they move. And, and who the hell cares if they just want food or something in the morning? When I'm getting my morning kisses, I am and, it takes a lot of, also you need to know how to handle pets, and it's a discipline, and it can be messy, and it's more work. So don't run out and get a pet if you're not willing to do all that.
Very true.
If you are so inclined, and then like once in a while my dog will kiss my butt, right? And when she does that, I say, oh, thank you. Goddess, may more people kiss my ass, It's really, even though it's supposed to be a nasty thing, like, oh, it's a diminutive thing, like, I don't care about you. Really, kissing someone's ass is such a lovely, tender thing to do. If you do it with honor, and trying to give the person pleasure, it's a wonderful thing. So more people and things, trustworthy people and things that I want to kiss my ass should actually kiss my ass.
And that would bring you all the joy.
Yes. So that brings me joy. And
Yes.
I love, there's something about, especially, well, I guess any animal, but for me, the little animals, when they're like, they kind of jump and then she kind of like, it's like a tiny little horse, because I don't bet on the races because I can't stand to have my hard-earned money go that fast, if you lose. But oh my God, do I love to see horses run, I also do a meditation every morning. That has come over many years of development. I use I use sacred acoustics. It's one of the binaural ones, and I use earth and Om, to primordial creative mother and Mother Earth, to help support me physically and give me that sense of, because for me and many people who have extra traumatized histories, because after the pandemic, everyone pretty much, but remember, it's not as bad as the people who are already traumatized, but it's bad. So, for people who trauma to feel safe. And then even though I know, like there are, folks in war zones, so I give thanks. I used to live in New Orleans. Luckily, it was not during Katrina. And I saw some heartrending documentaries afterwards where a grown, and especially in Black culture and many other oppressed cultures, and even in mainstream culture, man's not supposed to cry kind of thing. And so, I don't want my man crying all the time, but sometimes when appropriate, I want him to cry, So, but I want him to, just as me, to be strong enough that through his tears, we help the family survive and get what we need. And he cried, and the reporter said, what would you wish for? What would you need? He says, I wish for normalcy. So I do, and I hate when gratefulness was put on me in churches and other institutions, even New Age people, it's like, don't complain, you should be grateful. And it's like, no, I have injury. I need to be able to complain. So what I like about some of the one of the tapping companies that I tap along with, because it's so nice not to have to read or memorize what is the statement you're tapping to, and when to get a verbal cue of when to switch to the next point and so forth. And if you're really crafty, certain points relate to certain physical and emotional. So it doesn't have to be that complicated, but if you can do it right, it's even more powerful. Like this is the stomach meridian right here. And so if so stomach is about nurturing yourself. So if you were doing an affirmation or a statement about, nurturing yourself, getting what you need, being full.
And for listeners, Dr. EK is tapping kind of cheekbones.
Yeah. Right under the pupil of the eye, if you're looking straight ahead on the cheekbone.
Yeah, and you just lightly tap. Yeah.
And remember to go gently, because when I first started, because, the only way I survived is like, gung-ho, do what it takes to survive. And so I bruised myself a lot in the beginning, but now I'm so good. And now I remind my internal mother is so good and strong now that she reminds me, if I find myself like desperately like, okay, let's get this done, like get this feeling, process, that I remember to be gentler with myself. So if you can tap on the right acupressure place, but if you're like me, if you have ADD, PTHD, you got a whole lot going on, it doesn't matter. Better to tap than not tap, right? And so, so I do the meditate. And I don't do, a lot of the meditation is about think of nothing. Oh, you are bad, but, so gentle is the number one word that I remember to be gentle myself. And one of my life sayings that my students thought it was really funny. It's not complicated Spanish, más que nada, Mejor que ayer, but más que nada is easier to say. So más que nada means better than nothing, and mejor que ayer means better than before, so it's something, and it does help. Every little bit, counts without diminishing the little bit. I gave a friend's daughter, I gave her $35, which, for me was a lot. And that, in that way. And she says, well, every little bit helps. And I was like, I wanted to say, bitch, give me my money back. Little bit. That doesn't sound like, that doesn't sound like gratefulness. So, joy, and taking time to notice my pets when they're kissing me. And, I am being treated like a queen. And, if I've ever prayed, for someone who's just happy I'm alive, I have someone, who's happy I'm alive, even if it's because they want to eat. And so, because they're giving me love and affection versus mommy, I'm hungry.
Yeah. It's beautiful, Dr. EK. This has been such a powerful conversation. I feel like I just got like a master class in, I don't even like that word. There needs to be another word for that.
I know. But then sometimes I try mistress class, but then it sounds like you're not the wife. You're the one someone's cheating.
Yeah. Language is tricky.
Inner power class.
I love it.
Goddess class.
The goddess class. Yes. Thank you. And I'll include the links to your book, which I've read. I think I've read the first 50 pages, and it was just gripping. Your story is incredible. There's so many life experiences that happen. And I'm very excited to finish the rest of it and just keep learning from you. So thank you so much for being here.
And thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you. You have a sweet soul, and I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Before we go, I'd like to read a poem, because poetry can reach our hearts in a different way. Poems can have us feel in a different way. And that's what this podcast is all about: expanding our hearts, deepening our empathy, and inviting in joy. So each week, you get a new poem. Reverend Dr. E.K. Daufin's book on fat and faith details her expansive, heartbreaking, challenging journey to connect the dots between her intersectionalities and reckon with them within our oppressive culture. And that feeling in the book, that feeling in my conversation with her connected me to the feeling I get from this poem, which is from Cole Arthur Riley's Instagram project page that's called Black Liturgies. And that's where I found this. Climb back inside your body. No more split selves, minds without skulls. Don't let them slice you apart. Flail and shake like a haunting. You are alive. Thank you for joining me today. My hope is that you're feeling a little less alone and a little more seen. So until the next episode, you can find me on Instagram at fatjoy.life, on YouTube at youtube.com/@fatjoy, and on Patreon at patreon.com/fatjoy. Please do check out the show notes for how you can connect with my amazing guest and for the links to the poem. All right, lovely. I am sending you off with my best wishes for an abundantly Fat Joy day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye-bye.